sorry. I guess that was kind of loud. I saw everyone go, whoa. Sorry about that. Welcome to the Common Ground Country Fair. What an absolutely gorgeous day we have, and I'm just looking at a sea of happy people, so thank you so much for being here. I'm Heather Spalding, and I'm the Deputy Director of Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. Need to talk more softly, is that what you're thinking? Sorry about that. Usually people ask me to speak up. Can you help with that, Lenny? Okay, Ernie's going to take care of us. Sorry about that. I'm Heather Spalding. I'm the Deputy Director of Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, MOFGA. And for those of you who don't know MOFGA, we are the organization that has been around since 1971, hosting the fair since 1976, and we have all kinds of wonderful educational programs about organic farming and gardening and living sustainably here in the Northeast bioregion. So we had a record attendance yesterday at the fair, and it looks like we might do that again today. And I wanted to mention a couple of things. First, I want to put a big thank you out there, a heartfelt thank you out there for all of the volunteers who make this event possible. We have about 3,000 individuals who come to the fair and make this happen, and many of whom work on the fair year-round, and wouldn't happen without them, so thank you. Another very exciting thing I wanted to mention is that, well, you can see the sun is shining down on all of us today. We're thrilled about that. This year, MOFGA installed a photovoltaic system that powers the fair. We have, so year-round, all of the energy it takes to run MOFGA and the Common Ground Country Fair is coming from the sun. And that's we got a lot of support from Revision Energy to make this happen. They've been working with us for 20 years, really. That's a project 20 years in the making. And you can visit the folks over at Revision in the energy and shelter area to see how you can scale a model of a photovoltaic array for your own home or business. So thank you to Revision. So I have the honor of introducing the person who's going to introduce today's keynote. Richard Silliboy is a gentleman. He's an inspiration to me and so many people in the MOFGA and Common Ground community. You may have seen Richard around because he's been here for many years. He makes brown potato ash baskets in the style of his Micmac ancestry. He's over in the Maine Indian Basketmakers tent on the north side of the Common. And he is the founder of that area of the fair. He's one of the founders, which I think started in 1985. Richard can correct me when he comes up, but I think it's been here for a very, very long time. And he's been a demonstrator and vendor there since the beginning. And he organized that area to help preserve the basket-making traditions of the Maliseet, the Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot tribes of Maine, and to help encourage the revival of the agriculturally based local communities. And through his work, he really focuses on the spirituality of interconnectedness, and I think we'll hear about that concept from both Richard and our keynote speaker today. He's been working hard to mentor the next generation of Indian basket makers. He does presentations and he speaks about the importance of tribal identification and knowing one's roots. So I hope you have a chance to visit Richard and all of the other people who are demonstrating and exhibiting over in the Maine Indian Basketmakers area. Really, they're trying to promote a better understanding and appreciation of the Maine Native people and culture through all of their educational displays and historic references. And they're also advocating for the protection of the brown ash trees, which many of you probably know are threatened by invasive species. So please join me in welcoming the person who's going to introduce today's keynote, Richard Silliboy.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Heather for that great introduction. I think she explained everything that I was getting up here to talk about. Anyways, I am Richard Silliboy from the Mi'kmaq tribe. I live up in Aroostook County, Littleton, and which is just north of Holton for people who haven't been up that far. People talking about saying, yeah, I visited Maine. I say, where would you go? And they said, Portland. I said, that's not Maine. There's 400 miles of Maine north of that. So, I am a basket maker and probably 6 generations of basket makers. We are threatened with the species of the emerald ash borer. And not only that, but also the global warming, the climate change. And they're predicting that within 30, 40 years there will be no brown ash in this area anyway, because of the warmth of the climate. Everything was moving north, so we're being threatened in that way also. The species that are usually found down into the southern part of New England or southern Maine are moving further north, like the deer ticks and other insects like that. So it's everything that we're concerned about is being true, and everything that's been predicted by some of our elders are being, coming true. But that's enough about me. Our keynote speaker is a very special friend of mine, and she is from the Penobscot, and a lawyer and a teacher and a spiritual activist and human rights activist with from many awards, throughout, the United States and international. So I'm going to call up Sherri Mitchell now to give her speech. And big round of applause for her, please.
I just want to say Malalan to my elder, Richard Silliboy, for his work and for his words this morning, and for opening the space that allowed for us to be here together today. It's a very challenging day for me. I wouldn't have been here except that what we're talking about today is really important to me in a real heart-based way. And this community that's been created here in the state of Maine is really important to me in a heart-based way, and I wanted to honor the commitment that I made to all of you to be here today and to share a little bit about our basic worldview, connection to land, our responsibilities towards engaging in meaningful relationship with that land. And so I have some prepared comments, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that are going on, and then I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have. So, Wuliwan, thank you for having me here. Wuli Spuzwell, good morning to you all. Nandali Wisi, Wanahamugasit, Najiupanawapskeg, Dilnabamo Kawasos, Nobanawapskeg, Nagakakugus, Notzabaik, and Nalita Haziu and Diane. My name is Sherri Mitchell. I'm from the Penobscot Nation. My family is Bear Clan from the Penobscot Nation and Crow Clan from the Passamaquoddy tribe at Sibayak. And I'm happy to be here with you today.
I'm here today to talk to you about creating a framework for a way of life that is in harmony with the rest of creation. As always, my story begins with a basic worldview that frames the way of life that I live and walk on Mother Earth. Our discussion begins right here, on the land that we are all sitting and standing upon. For many, the land of their birth is seen as an extension of their bloodline, not just in a purely metaphorical sense, but through tangible connections to the flesh, bone, and blood of the ancestors that lived and died there. There's a Crow elder named Crow who once said, "The soil you see beneath your feet is not ordinary soil. It is the dust of the blood, the flesh, and the bones of our ancestors. The land as it is my blood and my dead, and I would not give it up, not for anything." This land here holds the dust of the blood, the flesh, and the bones of my ancestors. And I'd like you all to just take a moment and take your hand, put it on the earth, and join me in a moment of silence to honor the presence of those ancestors here on this land. Thank you. Could you really want? So the relationships that exist between people and place are often memorialized through defining words that merge into story. As Indigenous peoples, our lives are comprised of these words and the stories that they tell. In order for us to find balance with the world around us, we must recognize that our stories are not the only stories that are being told. Every living thing has its own language and its own story. If we hope to live in balance and harmony in this world, we must learn to hear the many stories that are being told around us. Once we do, our worldview begins to change. We begin to see things with a new form of reverence. We recognize the value that exists in each aspect of creation. When we begin to comprehend the subtle language of creation, we start to see the underlying structure that supports all life on this planet. Our ears become attuned to new frequencies. Then we find that we're able to hear the voices of the trees, understand the buzzing of the bees, and we realize that it is the interwoven substance of these floating rhythms that holds us in delicate balance with all life. Then, perhaps for the first time in our lives, we're able to witness the perfectly orchestrated dance of creation and see the balance that exists within it. We recognize that when the trees breathe in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, our lungs automatically mirror that movement by breathing in the oxygen that is generously given and releasing carbon dioxide back to the trees. We see our connectivity and interdependence with one another, and we understand that our web of kinship extends far beyond our human family. My tribe has a number of creation stories, and each one of those stories tells us a different aspect of our being. One of those stories tells us that we were created when Glooskap, who is the man from nothing, shot an arrow into the ash tree and opened a doorway into this world. This story teaches us that we were made of the same fundamental elements that make up the natural world. In this story, we are born out of the ash tree. Thus, the ash tree is our kin and should be honored in the same way that we honor our human family. Today, as was mentioned earlier, our tribes still recognize our relationship with the ash tree by weaving our traditional baskets from its pulp. I encourage you to go to the Maine Indian Basketmakers tent and to see those baskets when you leave here. When we weave those baskets, we are reminding ourselves that we are woven from those same foundational elements that make up all life on this planet. This worldview is ancient and it's held by peoples from across the globe in many different forms. It reminds us of our place in creation, keeping us grounded and balanced. And it also provides us with a new cultural reality, a new ethos, where the underlying spirit of our humanism is extended to everything animate and inanimate that exists in the universe. Over the last few centuries, we've developed a very humanistic view of the world. From this perspective, humans are viewed as the dominant beings, and the earth and all other living creatures are simply seen as resources to be exploited. We have developed countless laws and social contracts that support this narrow view of our place in the world, but these laws and social contracts are based in dominance ideologies that are grossly imbalanced with the rest of creation. All of the laws that have been made are based on some form of common agreement, and every agreement contains both rights and responsibilities. When we talk about rights from an Indigenous perspective, we recognize that they are inextricably tied to a corresponding set of responsibilities that require us to maintain a balanced relationship with the rest of creation. This is natural law, this is the Creator's law, and it's based on our earliest agreement. In our original treaty, our agreement with the Creator, that's when we began our relationship with this world. In our language, the word that is used for agreement is lugudwagan, which literally translated means entering into kinship with another. It is understood that the forming of an agreement is the forming of a relationship. When we enter into those relationships, we're agreeing to treat the other with the same degree of care and respect that we treat our kin. We know that if we want to claim the rights provided under that agreement, we must honor the responsibilities as well. In our first agreement, we were given the right to inhabit this earth and to live off the sustenance provided by the land. The responsibility that we took on to balance that right was to live in harmony with the natural world and all living beings. The way that we have honored that agreement is by living in respectful balance with our land and waterways for thousands of years. The evidence of our continued adherence to that agreement can be found in the core principles that have been woven into the practices of our modern-day tribal governance. It can be seen in the conscious steps that we've taken to honor and protect the lands and waters that we inhabit. It can be seen in the harvesting limits that are found in our forestry programs, in fish and game laws that take careful measure to ensure the sustainability of our traditional food sources, and in decades-long restoration projects that have restored and revitalized the waters of our sacred waterway, the Penobscot River, and in the creation of land and quality standards that protect and sustain the health of our lands and waters for all current and future generations. Taking active responsibility for our obligations under this original agreement provides a natural balance and a solid footing for the rights that we claim. Without this balance, we would destroy the very ground that these rights are built upon. If we want evidence of this truth, we don't have to look very far. We only have to look at the unchecked destruction of the natural world that is being caused by capitalist greed, the failure of industry to take responsibility for the destruction of our planet, and our complacency and complicity. They're quickly taking away our right to live our lives on this planet. Of course, when I talk about natural laws, I'm talking about the laws of creation, which are not generally aligned with the laws of man. As human beings, we have fallen out of step with the rest of creation. We have lost our way and overinflated our sense of value. In doing so, we have walked away from the fundamental law that keeps this world in balance. As a result, the entire creation has become imbalanced. Our relationships with all other living beings and our relationships with one another. Man's attempt to regain this balance has resulted in a series of legal obligations that inform us how we are to treat one another. We've become so lost that we have to have laws that tell us how to be human and how to engage in human relationships. Though these laws are vital to securing our freedoms and liberties, they fail to take into consideration the need to balance the place of human beings within the larger context of creation. In order for us to achieve true balance, we must work to extend those rights to all living beings and to Mother Earth herself. If we hope to live in a society where rights are valued, then we have to be willing to adopt an ethical stance toward our inherent responsibilities as human beings. First, we must recognize that an exclusive and empty insistence on rights creates a vacuum of need that can never be filled. Demanding rights without taking responsibility creates a warped sense of entitlement that often leads to violence, lawlessness, and chaos. Second, we have to acknowledge that the rules of law pertaining to our rights are only as strong as the men and women who are willing to act with honor and justness to secure those rights for all, not just for their group, not just for their species. When my tribe decided that the Penobscot River needed to be cleaned of the decades of toxic waste created by industry, they didn't simply stand up on a soapbox and claim a right to clean water. Instead, they worked in concert with others and took on the responsibility of cleaning those waters for the benefit of all current users and for the enjoyment of all future users. We recognize that if we wanted to claim the right to clean water for our own people, then we had to take responsibility for ensuring clean water for everyone. When we looked at our right to subsistence living, we recognized that this also came with a set of unique responsibilities. In order to properly claim those rights, we had to work to protect the rights of Mother Earth to exist with all of her ecological systems and biodiversity intact, in order to ensure that the wildlife in our territories could live and thrive upon those lands just as we hope to. In doing so, we acknowledged that our rights were interconnected, interdependent, tied to the rights of all other living beings that made their home there. The same principle translates into our individual lives and the work that we are doing collectively to protect both human and earth-based rights. It helps us to remember that our demand for rights must be balanced with a set of clear responsibilities. We must be willing to do more than make a demand. We must be willing to actively work to create a world where that demand can be met. We cannot claim a right to clean water without taking responsibility for actively protecting the water from contamination and overuse. We cannot claim a right to clean air without taking responsibility for the creation of healthy and sustainable energy sources and industrial practices. We cannot claim a right to a more equitable economy without taking responsibility for how and where we spend our money. And we cannot claim a right to ethical leadership without taking responsibility for voting in candidates that we believe in rather than those that we believe can win. We cannot claim a right to life without first taking responsibility for the lives that have already been created. And we cannot claim a right to peace without taking responsibility for cultivating peace within ourselves and in our relationships with others, even those that we oppose. When our rights are not balanced with a solid sense of responsibility, we lead toward dependency and begin blaming others for the problems that we face. And we begin demanding that others step in and solve those problems. We point fingers, accuse, and condemn all those who are refusing to do what we ourselves have failed to do individually and collectively. When our demands aren't met, we become increasingly angry and lash out in response to that anger. This is where we depart decisively from our most basic moral compass when we fail to adhere to what's known as the golden rule, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. When we demand something for ourselves that we are not willing to ensure for others, our demand loses all of its power. When we fail to take responsibility for the condition of our lives and the lives of those around us, we relinquish the power to chart our own course and the course of humanity. We also surrender our ability to change the world. However, when we take even small steps to accept responsibility, the responsibility that's needed to balance our own demands, we immediately begin to see change in the world around us. Every single person that's here at the Common Ground Fair has taken at least one step. And so if you look around, you can see all of the people who are complicit with you in changing the world that we live in. If we truly hope to create change, we must stop forgetting that we have the power to make change happen. Instead, we must remember that we are many, that we have the power to completely divest our lives and financial resources from harmful practices that threaten all life on this planet. that we have the power to disengage from fear-mongering, sensationalism, othering, and other discordant tactics that are used to divide us. We must remember to stand up for one another and to communicate with one another in the spirit of unity, to see one another as kin. We must remember that we have the collective power to direct our economic and political systems and move them away from the practices of domination and destruction and back towards a more humane and restorative path. We must remember that we are all co-creators of the reality that we inhabit, and that we have the freedom to choose a new path, one that protects the rights of the entire ecosystem to live in balance. When we balance our demand for rights with an acceptance of our responsibility toward one another and all other living beings, we take back our power. We can begin the process of charting a new pathway forward by balancing the rights that we claim with a corresponding action that ensures those rights for all. Then, piece by piece, we will build a foundation for a rights-based society that is balanced, just, and harmonious. Maybe it won't be fast, maybe it won't be easy. I can assure you it probably won't be easy, but it won't happen at all if we don't make it happen together. And so there are countless people, thank you. The good news is that there are countless people around the world who are doing just that. There are people who are recognizing that projection becomes perception, and that, we project both the light and the darkness onto the screen of our reality. So our minds are the projector, our thoughts are the film, and the screen is the world that you see around you. And so when we project, whether we project the light or the darkness, we're giving away our power. Projecting the darkness is what happened on this land when there was a genocide of indigenous peoples. Projecting the darkness is what happens when you see something like the genocide in Nazi Germany. Projecting the darkness is saying that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. Projecting the darkness is saying that people in other parts of the world, such as the Middle East, are terrorists for protecting their homes, way of life, and families. That's a projection of darkness, and that's a separation of our power. We're taking the power from within us, we're projecting it out, and casting blame on someone else. They're responsible for the state of the world, it's not us. We also project our light when we expect others to come in and solve our problems for us. Our savior complex, our dependency on leadership and other people to come in and to solve our problems is also a separation of power. And so when we project our light, we also disconnect ourselves from the power and authority we have to dictate the type of world that we wish to inhabit. And so people are waking up all over the world. They're disengaging from the systems and the structures that have been leading to our destruction. They're recognizing that it is an act of conquest to supplant one candidate with another within a broken system and expect that that candidate is going to be able to change anything. It's like putting somebody in a car that has no steering and no brakes and putting the car into motion. The car's going to go for a little while, then eventually it's going to crash. They pull the car out of the ditch, they clean it all off, they take out the current driver, they put someone else in, they put the car in motion again, and it inevitably goes off the road. This is our current political system. This is the way that our government and societies have been structured. So we need to break away from that illusion, break away from that projection that putting somebody else in the driver's seat of that car is going to change the outcome. It's always going to derail because it was never made to drive straight. And so when we start thinking about where we invest our power, where we invest our energy, where we invest our money and our hearts and our passions, we have to think about what does the world we hope to create actually look like? What does it look like? And then start being and doing that. We have to take responsibility for stepping outside of the system that's being kept alive on life support artificially. We have to take our energy away from that false support system and start moving it into a new system, a new way of being, a new normal. Because what's become normal is completely unnatural for us. It's unnatural for us to be separated from the source of our survival. It's unnatural for us to be separated from one another in a heart-based way. It's unnatural for us to not live in community. Just because that's become normal doesn't mean that that's natural. We need to reconnect to our natural state of being, which is in harmony and kinship with one another, in harmony and kinship with the rest of the world. And then we need to create together, based on that grounded place, that grounded sense of knowing, a new normal that we can all walk into together. And so that's the impetus for the work that I do. That's, I know, the impetus for the work that a lot of you do. The only thing that we need to do right now, I think the primary thing that we need to do right now is to decolonize our minds and let go of the illusion that someone else is going to come along and solve our problems for us. We have to, thank you. I heard I did a talk with Rob Shutterly, who did the Americans Who Tell the Truth portrait series the other night, and Rob was talking about this concept of original sin. And in my mind, original sin is our belief in the illusion of separation. That's the place where we really decisively departed from our own sense of power and our own source of survival, our own inherent truth that we hold as living beings that are part of one large living creation. And so being able to walk away from that illusion, to wake up and to realize what we're walking towards. The time that we're in right now, our people call the dance of the Cannibal Giant. Giwalk is the Cannibal Giant who lives deep in the forest. And he only awakens to a specific cry from the Earth Mother. He wakes up when people are consuming faster than she can produce and harming her faster than she can heal. And what Giwalk's role is to dance civilization into this blind fury of activity until they eventually dance themselves off the edge. They dance themselves to destruction so that the Earth Mother has time to restore and renew herself. We're living in the time of the fourth dance of the Cannibal Giant. We've been told that we've been here 4 times before, and we weren't able to get it together. And so every time we come closer and closer, and we unify more and more. But right now, we're also living in a time of prophecy. You have the prophecy of the Rainbow Warriors, you have the 8th Fire prophecy, you have the Crazy Horse prophecy, the Eastern Door prophecy. You have all of these prophecies rising up and coming together. Is our responsibility toward those teachings to just watch them come and go? Or is our responsibility to actively engage in the time that we are living in order to create an outcome that is aligned with our true heart? I believe that that is our true purpose. So I don't know how long I've been talking, but I want to leave time for us to have some questions, but there are a couple of other things I want to talk to you about. We have a sacred property in Passadumkeag, Maine, in Penobscot territory. We had a very large gathering called Healing the Wounds of Turtle Island there over the summer, where we had representatives from every continent except Antarctica. We couldn't get any scientists or penguins to come, but every other continent was represented, and the people there came together with the intent of healing the common wound that we all carry, healing this shared history of violence that we've all participated in, whether we have been the victims of violence, the perpetrators of violence, the witness to violence, recognizing that we all carry a spiritual wound from that, and coming together with the intent of healing that in a unified way, looking at each other, sitting with each other, eye to eye, heart to heart, breath to breath, and recognizing that we're all wounded, and that we can't heal unless we take responsibility for one another's healings. The earth can't heal unless we're healed. You know, we can't heal unless the earth is healed. There's this dance of interconnectivity that we're all a part of. And so we had this gathering at this place called Nabizin, which is this really beautiful sacred space where our ancestors used to gather. And that property went out of the hands of tribal people for a long, long time. And just recently, tribal people have had the opportunity to take that land back. And what was chosen to do with that property was to turn it into a healing center. And so it's a cultural healing center where people come together to engage in activities that facilitate healing. So it was a perfect place for us to hold the Healing Turtle Island gathering, because within its essence, it holds the energy of that healing. And so in order to be able to maintain that property, the tribal members who stepped forward to save it made an agreement with a land trust to make, in 1 year's time, a very large balloon payment. That payment is due 1 month from tomorrow, I believe. And so I have had brochures and flyers handed out to give you all information on Nabizin, so that you can all join us in supporting that really important sacred place and to keep it in the hands of tribal people. Thank you. And so why should you care about Indigenous land rights? Why should you care about these lands being held in the hands of Indigenous peoples? Because Indigenous lands that remain in the hands of traditional Indigenous peoples are some of the only remaining untouched lands on the planet. Indigenous peoples have rights under both domestic and international law that are unique. This is why there's a concerted effort going on around the country and around the world to dismantle Indigenous rights, because they do provide a buffer that is not ordinarily there. In our water case with the state of Maine, just to connect the dots. You can connect the dots. I'm not going to connect them for you. I'm going to give you a series of events that occurred, and you can decide what happened. So in July of 2012, Canada passed a resolution that allowed for a reversal of what's called Line 9, Enbridge Line 9, which was flowing to the west. They did the reversal to allow that pipeline to flow to the east so that they could bring dirty tar sands from the west, from the Alberta tar sands to the east. Shortly after that meeting, individuals from our government, including Governor Paul LePage, representatives from the DEP and others, went to Canada and met with Canadian officials and ExxonMobil. In August, less than a month after Enbridge Line 9 was reversed, the Maine Attorney General's office issued a memorandum saying that the Penobscot Nation did not have territorial rights to their waterways. Yeah, boo. So those rights have been recognized in the 2010 Maine Supreme Court case called Maine v. Johnson, which recognizes the Southern Territorial waters of the tribe. They're recognized in countless treaties. They're recognized in the 2010 Bureau of Census maps as reservation waters. But all of a sudden in 2012, all of the tribe's rights just unilaterally disappeared because the route that those were going to take, the transmission of the dirty tar sands and also of the hydrofracked gas that was being cultivated in New Brunswick was from Coburn Gore to Calais, Maine, to go to shipping ports. So what else do you know of that was scheduled to go from Coburn Gore to Calais, Maine? The big industrial corridor called the East-West Corridor. And so when you start putting all the dots together, and when you've done some Indigenous rights work outside of the state of Maine and outside of the United States, you start to recognize a pattern. There's always a preemptive strike against Indigenous rights. prior to that. The Penobscot River is the lifeblood of the entire ecosystem of the center of the state of Maine. It's the largest body of water in the state of Maine. And all of the cities and towns from Coburg Gore to Calais would be impacted, because it's not a matter of if a tar sands pipeline will leak, but when. And it's in all of our interests to ensure that those people who have taken responsibility for being good stewards of the land, which the Penobscot Nation has proven to be, they're the ones that took responsibility for cleaning up those waterways, are allowed to maintain their relationship with those waterways so that those waterways are protected into the future. And so that work is critically important, and it not only impacts us, it impacts the entire ecosystem connected to the Penobscot River. It impacts every single city and town in the state of Maine. This is known as vacation land. That will quickly go away if we allow our environment and our vital ecosystems to be destroyed by industry. So that's why it's important for you all, from a legal standpoint, to protect Indigenous rights. From a human and spiritual standpoint, it's important because you recognize that you are not disconnected from it, you are not disconnected from us, that we're all in this together. The destruction of any one of us leads to the destruction of all of us. And if we don't stand up and make those assertions, what we call samognos, it's a warrior philosophy of holding back the tide of harm to the degree that prevents it without inflicting harm on the other. We're saying we're not going to allow you to harm our lives or the lives of our children, but we honor your life and we're not going to harm your life. And so we need to walk that practice of samognos, not just in theory, but actually feet on the ground, prayers in movement, as a way of life, what we call skajinawe b'malsawagan, which is living an Indigenous way of life close to the earth. So I would like for all of you to join us and bring all of your friends. It's critically important that we achieve a membership of at the very least 500 people, not membership, participation. Participation of at least 500 people. There's way more than 500 people here. If everybody that's here grabs one or two friends just sitting on the lawn and brings them to this gathering, we're going to be in good shape. And it's going to be fantastic fun. On October 15th, we are having a harvest festival at Nabizin to celebrate community, to celebrate unity, to celebrate the spirit of healing, and to celebrate the sacred lands and waters that we all share together. So mark your calendars, October 15th, Nabizin. There's flyers and brochures out there. Bring lots of friends. We're going to have the day start out at noon with drumming and traditional dancing. We're going to have food vendors there. We're going to have native artisans booths there. We're going to have a silent auction. If any of you amazing artists presenting at the Common Ground Fair would like to donate an item for our silent auction, we would love it. We would be incredibly grateful. There's going to be children's games and activities, and then we're going to have 3 other bands throughout the day, and we're going to end the day with a huge dance party featuring soul benders. So it's going to be fun. It's a really important cause. We need all of you to show up with us and join us in that celebratory event that is really a coming together of community, demonstrating what community means, putting our feet and our money and our mouths where we claim that we want to stand, which is on solid ground together in unity in a space of healing. So please come. Nabizin is in Passadumkeag. I have flyers and brochures up here. Nabizin is N-I-B-E-Z-U-N. What Nabizin means in our language is healing. So you can find it. There's going to be flyers and brochures in the Maine Indian Basketmakers tent as well. And so before I end today, I want to ask you all if you would do something for me and with me. I would like for you all to stand up and to hold hands with the people that are next to you.
Ice cream.
Everybody connect with somebody. If somebody doesn't want to hold your hand, put your finger on their arm, just like an annoying little brother or sister would do. And so I want to share with you something that's very personal for me. And the reason why I almost wasn't here today. This year has been a very difficult year for our family. In January, one of my cousins went missing and his body was found in the Penobscot River. 1 week after his body was found, my beloved nephew, who was like a son to me, whose mother has been like a sister and a second mother and aunt to me, lost her son to suicide. In Native communities, the suicide rate is 4 times higher than the national average because of the unrelenting oppression that our communities have experienced. I grew up in a community where there were houses on 3 sides of my house. In every single one of those houses, the majority of the children that I grew up with died by either suicide or drug overdose. It's an epidemic in our community that is caused by people turning a blind eye to our suffering. It's caused by people not standing with us in times of struggle. It's caused by our young people not seeing a future for themselves because of the constant oppression, the constant racism, the constant degradation of our images and our names that are being bandied about. If we want to save our young people, if we want to save our future, if we want to be able to walk forward together, then we need to continue to exist into the future. And this morning at 2 a.m., one of my other nephews took his life. And I'd like to ask you all to not only pray for him and for his father and his little girl, but to also acknowledge the preciousness of every single life. Acknowledge the separation that makes us believe that any one of us is traveling alone. Don't blow off as, I don't have time, I'm too busy, you're annoying, go get some help for your issues. Don't treat other people with that kind of dismissiveness. Acknowledge the preciousness of every single life. So please send prayers for the spirits of those lost young men. That's our future that we're losing. And they were beautiful people, every one of them. And I would like to ask you to turn to the people that you're holding hands with and look them in the eye and tell them, you are precious, you're important, you matter, I love you, and then give them a hug, and we'll end our time together like that. So, Kachewili one.
Johnny Hub.
Love you, Sherri! Love you too!